I'm going to be talking about creating great town centres. I first became fascinated by town centres about 15 years ago when I was living in Oxford in a place called Summertown. And Summertown was just a delightful place to live. I'd moved from Sydney and I just enjoyed all the facilities that this small centre provided. I could spend a whole weekend without ever going more than a block from where I lived. It had library, it had community facilities, there was evening courses, there was bookshops, there was bars. I think you know, bookshops, bars, pubs, restaurants, supermarkets. But it wasn't a very big place. It was a small centre, and it was like a lot of Australian centres. It was just based around a main street, retail on both sides of the street. It had, you know, if you go into a bit of detail about some of the uses, there was retail, so that's the orange. There were supermarkets, that's the blue. There were car parks, that's the grey. There were civic and community facilities, so library, school. Being Oxford, there was student housing, student accommodation. BBC Oxford was also based in Summertown. And what that meant was there was a life there that went almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I came back to Australia, I thought, this is where I want to live. This is the sort of place that I want to live in Sydney. And I also want to use my urban design skills to create more places like that in Sydney. And the first opportunity I had to do that was when I was working for Stockland. I was working on the new neighbourhoods that were being built across Australia. And I was working with Stockland's retail team on the little centres that were being delivered as part of those new neighbourhoods. And what I found working with these retail guys was that they understood retail. They understood the drivers of retail. They knew what created successful retail. But I knew from my experience in Summertown, what creates successful retail is not necessarily what creates a great centre. That a great centre is more than just its retail. It's all the other uses and all the other activities that happen there as well. And so I spent some time writing a toolkit for the business on how to create successful small centres. And I was also able to create put that into practice on a project in Mernda in Victoria called Mernda Villages. So I created a little village centre, and I was there last year, and it's almost completely built, and it was just delightful to walk around and have a look at it. A few years later, when I was working for Arup, I was able to use that knowledge to win and then sort of deliver town centre projects in Nowra and in Cessnock. And again, I was able to sort of use that sort of understanding about all the different synergies that are involved in creating great centres to create these great places. And most recently, as part of Studio GL, we've been working on the Five Dock Town Centre. And you'll hear a lot about Five Dock Town Centre just because it's the most recent project I've been working on. So I think there are 7 signs of success. And I'm going to go through all of them one by one. It's connected, vibrant, diverse, comfortable, accessible, viable and memorable. So the first one, connected, which is how joined up is a place, how easy or linked together is it? And you're all sitting there thinking, oh, I'm just going to listen to her, it's going to be calm, but no, there's a quiz. Who thinks that the one on the left-hand side is the most connected place? Raise your hands. Okay, who thinks the one on the right is the most connected place? Yeah, don't be shy, raise your hands. Yeah, that's correct. The one on the left is what Five Dock Town Centre looks like now, and the one on the right is what it will look like if all the new connections that are recommended in the urban design study are able to be delivered. So why do we think about connection? Why is connection such a big issue? So this diagram, you can see the grey dots, the grey blobs, they're car parks. And the one to the north, so this one here with the stripe on it, is a car park with a supermarket above it. And in this place, the supermarket's only been built in the last 5 years. And what we found, this is in Five Dock, and we found talking to people that what's happened is that people don't like parking in the car park under the supermarket. They park in the council car park and walk along this little ant track to the supermarket. And what that's doing is starting to change the way that centre works. So the shops that face onto the main street have realised that there's all this activity happening along their back fences. And so they've started to put connections into those shops. And new shops are also kind of locating themselves just off that laneway because they can see all that activity, and so therefore they want to be where that activity is occurring. So this is why it's very important to think about where the connections are. Where are people arriving in the centre, and also where are they going to? And connection's also really important because badly connected places have a real impact on the strength of this place. This is an aerial photo of Nowra, and Nowra has a traditional main street which is on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, on the other side of Princes Highway, is where the shopping centre is. And the two centres function completely separately. There's almost no relationship between those two centres. So all the life that they could share, and that all those opportunities for synergies isn't occurring. Vibrant. So this is having life, showing great energy, activity and energy. So quiz time again. Who thinks the one on the left is the most vibrant place? Yay! And the one on the right. But interestingly enough, if you ask the same question, vibrancy isn't always just about how attractive a place is. Vibrancy is about how many people are there and how many people are enjoying the place. And part of that is also getting people to stay in a place longer. It's getting people to linger, because then you're also going to get more vibrancy in a place. And one of the ways you can create vibrancy is you create this mix of uses, and you also attract people and different sorts of people. So one of the things I love about this photo is you have both the mum and the stroller, and you also have the senior citizen enjoying the same space. And they're the people that we need to think about when we look at our town centres. Vibrancy is also about how the buildings relate to the street. I took the top photo I took in West Village in New York, and I love the little row of people sitting in the cafe, kind of on the edge of the street, watching the life go by. They're very much part of the street, and the street life is part of what they're experiencing. And the little bread shop, that's opened its windows onto the street, or the two people sitting in a cafe in Kirribilli, and they've become a kind of a living window to life and activity on the street. But temporary uses can also help. We know that you can use vans and temporary furniture to kind of create activity in places that are a little bit dead. And activities and street art and and sort of buskers, all these sort of things help activate a place and also change the way people feel about a place. Diversity. Now, diversity. This is the really tricky one. Now, who thinks, these are two diagrams that just show different land uses within a town centre. The one on the left is showing the supermarket, so you can see the big orange blobs. The one on the right is showing a more traditional main street with the range of different shops. So who thinks the one on the left shows the greatest amount of diversity? Who thinks the one on the right shows? Yay! So diversity is this idea about a range of services and facilities in a place. And this was from the Small Centres Toolkit, and you can see the red is the retail. This was what the business had started to focus on, and all the other colours are all the other things that we were starting to say were going to help activate the place and create that sense of a really strong town centre that people loved and people used throughout the day. So you're looking at community uses, you're looking at education, where's the local school, you're looking at entertainment facilities, is there a cinema, places of worship, churches, all these things add to the life and add to the activity that can occur in a centre. And so this is the diagram we did for Nowra, where we looked at where all the facilities, where all the services were, what was the mix of uses that were occurring. We also looked at things like vacant buildings, because vacant buildings show part of a centre that's not working terribly well. And again, with 5DOC, we also looked at it. We mapped where the supermarkets were, where the shopping centre, where the car parks were. The orange is post offices and banks, and the green are civic uses, so schools, libraries, things like that. And what we found when we mapped the centre like this was that there was a real concentration of activity. There was a clustering of activity on the south of the centre. Comfortable, allowing you to be relaxed. I just think that's a delightful description. And I think, I won't ask you all to do this again, but if you look at those two slides, which is the one you'd rather spend some time? If you had to wait for somebody on the street corner, which is the place that you'd rather be? But comfort's also about the proportions of the space. It's how the space fits together. It's where the shops are located. It's also about sun access. So this is a little diagram showing the new town town square in Five Dock. And one of the things we were looking at was if you were going to put higher buildings to the north, they were going to overshadow the whole of the town square. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at the development controls to make certain that you weren't going to lose. You could still get some more development, but you weren't going to lose sun in the town square, particularly even on the shortest day of the year in winter. Comfort is also about kind of creating spaces that kind of you feel protected, that you feel that you're not on the edge of the road. And what I love about this photo is that all those uses are temporary. So people have just pulled out a trolley and some seating, and that's enough for people to sit next to quite a busy road and feel really comfortable about enjoying that place. So it's about creating places that people feel comfortable to sit and enjoy. And it's also about trees and landscaping. So again, with the Five Dock study, we discovered that the northern end of the centre didn't have the same landscape treatment. So one of the recommendations was to create new landscaping for that northern end. And it's one of the highest priorities, and the City of Canada Bay is actually implementing this now. Topography also has an impact on how comfortable a place is. So if you're, what we've found is that people don't like walking up and down hills if they can possibly avoid it. So actually how the topography of the centre works also has an impact. So what we found with Five Dock was that the clustering of all that retail activity was happening on the ridge, on this area where there was very little level change, where there was very little sort of topography and change of level. And a successful town centre needs a heart, it needs a core. And in Five Dock, the core was in Fred Kelly Place. I can see Stephanie walking in from Canada Bay Council. And people loved that town centre, they loved their core of their town. But they kept telling us, it's not big enough. Where can we have our markets? Where can we have our events? And so one of the things with the Five Docks Town Centre was that council owned a piece of land opposite that, and that initially they wanted to look at whether there were any development opportunities for that site. And in the end, the recommendation on the study was not to develop at that site, but to turn it into a bigger town square, which actually gave a stronger heart for the centre of the town. Accessible, so something that can be used, entered into and reached. So if you explain this diagram, the green is bus routes, the green stops are bus stops, yellow is safe pedestrian crossing points. Who thinks that the one on the left looks to be the most accessible place? Come on, hands up, yay! Yes, and the one on the right. And one of the this is again from Five Dock, one of the recommendations was to increase the amount of safe pedestrian crossing points on the northern side of the centre. And we're now looking at Nowra, and the accessibility is also that idea about where it's safe to cross. So the Nowra, you've got this issue where you've got the main street and the supermarket are a long way apart. And it's even worse than the distance. If you actually map what a person needs to do to get from one side to the other, there's a signalised intersection off to the left, so you've got to go all the way up there to get down, and then there's a pedestrian bridge overpass down on the right. So these are the sort of the routes that people are expected to take to try and get from one side of the centre to the other. And obviously when you do something like that, you get bad behaviours. This is from Google Maps. You can see people walking down the centre of the median strip because you're stopping people doing what they really want to do, which is connect both sides of the centre. So one of the key recommendations we made for Nowra was that they put a signalised intersection at the end of the Junction Street, which is the main street of the centre, so that you could link both sides of the highway together. And we very deliberately showed an image of a small child crossing that space because they're the sort of people that at the moment are not accommodated in the centre at all. But it's also about the quality of that access. So this is a link that goes from the car park in Five Dock to the main street, and one of the things that was recommended through the study was actually upgrading the quality of that link. And the ideas like the green wall and the blackboard came out of the community consultation. Viable, this issue about places being viable. The one on the right is actually a site in Sydney, and council, asked people to put retail along that street. It's a supermarket development, but they also didn't allow any parking in front of those shops, and so the shops are vacant. The supermarket is trading off its back car park, and this retail that was a requirement just doesn't have any life. So it's about the design, that link between how people are going to arrive, how people are going to use those facilities. And it's also about thinking about how the facilities interrelate. So again, in Five Dock, there's an existing key attractor in the centre, which is a supermarket, and there was an opportunity to build a second one. So one of the things we looked at was where was the most appropriate place to put that? And one of the options was to the very north, and this was quite equitable in that it kind of gave the balance between one side of the centre and the other. But the problem with it was that from the earlier mapping, all the activity was happening to the south. So what it was going to do was actually diffuse the activity and life in the centre. Another option was on the left-hand side, and when I did the Cessnock master plan, we had a similar situation where all the supermarkets were off the main street, off on one side, and what that had done had killed the life on the main street. So actually what we recommended was that the second anchor was placed on the other side of the main street, so that both anchors enliven the main street. So it's about encouraging development. It's looking at your development controls, your planning controls. This is a bit complicated, but basically the FSR for the area was quite high, and the DCP controls hadn't been written had been written earlier, and so therefore you were getting these very squat buildings that were creating very poor quality apartments. So the recommendation was to increase height, but not change the FSR, which made the buildings more viable, but also kind of created this better quality outcome. And the last one is memorable, so it's worth remembering. What's a place that's worth remembering, particularly if it's special or unusual? And, I could also show a photo of a historic building here. The historic fabric of our centres helps a place become memorable and unique. This is an example of landscaping in Auckland in New Zealand, and you can see the high quality landscape and the character that landscape creates. This is kids in Chicago, the fantastic piece of public art. People just love it. And of course, if anyone's been to Adelaide, these are the pigs in Rundle Mall, which, any small child it's hard to take a photo of these pigs without a small child sitting on them. So it's this idea of creating public art that brings people in, memorable lighting, making a fantastic opportunity to make a place more memorable. Nighttime economy is the way of the future for our town centres, because a few years ago, everyone wanted a town centre that was open 9 to 5. Now people want a town centre that's open into the evening, onto the weekends. We don't have a life that allows us to shop Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So therefore, our centres need to attract people into the evening and on weekends. The critical thing for Pittwater is understanding its place. So do a place check. There's lots of stuff online, lots of information. You can do place check through things like the collaborative map. This is what we did this is an ARIP program, allows people to put all their thoughts in online. What I loved about Five Dock was all the yellow. They're all suggestions. So if you ask people their suggestions, they give you their suggestions. So that's place check. The other thing is this idea about temporary urbanism, actually allowing people to reimagine their space and giving people the opportunity. This is the most famous example is Times Square in New York, where you've got, they basically wanted to make some changes, but they weren't sure whether it was going to be workable. For 6 months, they just changed the paint colour, put in some temporary barriers, put in some temporary planters, put some temporary chairs and tables, and said, is this going to work? And after 6 months, nobody wanted to go back to turning Times Square into cars again. And so this is this rapid prototyping. It's a fantastic way to change spaces. So I would really encourage people to use the Enliven Pittwater app, get online, add your suggestions, go online, see what's around there. Creating effective centres, it's just about following the signs. Thank you.